Hi, so this video is going to walk through the chapter on exemplification, just so you can have a better sense of what this essay is about. I will also be giving you some other handouts, or at least one other handout that breaks down this essay into different parts so that every paragraph is broken down into the different aspects that you need to kind of fill in to develop it. So I'll also make a little video to show you how to use that as well. You don't have to use that handout, but it can be helpful for people who like, graphic organizers to help them tackle a longer project. So exemplification is basically just an essay that develops an idea through examples or illustrations, right? Again, this is a way that we take something that tends to be abstract and we make it concrete. So abstract or concrete is something that can be understood through our five senses. Abstract is something that cannot be understood through our five senses. And so we have to then translate it into something that can be, right? So emotions are abstract. So how do we communicate what love is like? Well, we try to then compare it to something that people can understand, right? So when we use exemplification, we're trying to make something tangible to our reader by giving them specific examples so that they can really see when we say, oh, it was huge. Well, then we can say it was as big as my dad's John Deere tractor, right? And that gives people then something concrete that they can then understand what you mean by huge, right? So using exemplification, right? We'll wait for the chapter, right? Again, exemplification is one of the primary ways that humans communicate. It's going to be something that you're going to see especially a lot in education. We use examples all the time. And again, when we don't use those very specific details, we're just not being effective. You're going to see, if you really start paying attention to politicians or any kind of person that's trying to sell you something, though, they will oftentimes deal with what we see here, sweeping generalizations and vague statements. They will promise you all sorts of things. They'll make these really vague comments, or sweeping generalization is something that tries to say a whole lot, but it doesn't really. They'll say, since the beginning of time, right? Well, how can you say anything since the beginning of time? First of all, when is the beginning of time? Do you actually technically mean when did humans start calculating time, like 12-hour clock, 24 hours or whatever? Do you mean the beginning of time in terms of the beginning of the world, which, who was there? So how do you know, right? That's just a huge sweeping statement that really doesn't have any meaning, but it sounds impressive, right? So, it doesn't mean anything. So you have to be very careful about these kind of statements. We want to use specifics when possible to make our writing come alive, to give it meaning, right? And so again, here it says exemplification is used in every kind of writing. It doesn't matter the kind, to explain and clarify. Right? Clarify just means to make clear, right? It adds interest. So it's always more interesting when somebody gives a real personal anecdote, when they give you details. Well, maybe not always, but it's usually more interesting, right? And again, to persuade, excuse me, it's oftentimes much more persuasive when people use examples than it is just when they say because. Has somebody ever tried to get you to do something and you said, well, why? And they say, well, because, right? Parents oftentimes try to get kids to do something, well, because I said so, right? Instead of giving us real reasons and examples of why to do something, they just expect us to do it because they said so, right? Well, no, give us examples of why, right? So again, explaining and clarifying is one of the reasons why. We use examples to ensure clarity and avoid ambiguity, right? So here, this example, trying to compare two films, Frankenstein by James Whale and Dracula by Todd Browning, by linking them to the 19th century novels on which they're based. So again, you could make general specifics like, oh, these two films are lousy, they're not enough like the books, right? Well, okay, you can say that, but that's hardly clear or hardly specific. It's not very persuasive. I can give you something that happened this morning. I was on Facebook and a friend posted a comment, in my opinion, this singer is lousy and has no talent whatsoever. She didn't provide any examples, and I'd never heard of this singer, so I went onto YouTube, listened to the singer, thought her voice sounded a bit auto-tuned, so found a live performance. Her voice sounded really good. And I was like, well, I wonder why this person doesn't like the singer. I think she has a perfectly lovely voice. There didn't seem to be any tonality issues. So can't figure out why she thought she was a dreadful singer. Not that she didn't like her style, not that she didn't like her perhaps vocal quality. She was just an awful singer. That she couldn't sing, right? So when I hear somebody that says somebody can't sing, as a former musician myself, I'm thinking that they can't keep a tune or that they have no musicality, right? That they don't know how to interpret a song. And I didn't see any of those problems. So I want an example. Like, what do you mean? So her statement, and she said it was just an opinion, her statement lacked clarity, right? So give me an example. For example, in this song, this is why, right? So there's a problem if you don't give us those examples, right? Again, it also adds interest, right? So it gets us more engaged when we see those examples. So in this next paragraph, it says, choose examples that are interesting as well as pertinent. So when you're choosing a topic to write this essay about, make sure that you're choosing something that lends itself to really great examples. You may have quite a few things that you could write about for one of the topics that I've given you, right, to choose from, but is it going to be the best topic for an exemplification essay? That's part of the challenge of being a writer. We might have lots of ideas, but not all of them are going to be suited for the kind of essay that we're writing. So choose something, again, that you've got lots of examples that you can talk about, and they're the kind of examples that you can, on paper, really bring to life, right? Again, put yourself in your reader's shoes. Right? Maybe jot one down and then read it out loud to yourself. Tape yourself reading out loud and then listen to it back. Sometimes it's not enough just to read it out loud. Tape yourself and then hear it back again, right? Maybe wait for 24 hours and then play it back, right? Make sure that you're adding thought-provoking and spirited examples, right? Thought-provoking is important because we don't want them to be just so obvious or just so bleh that they don't get our reader engaged, right? We want